Okay, we are rolling, brother. Champions of Champions Boxing Talk is back. Well, Keith, one time Thurman fought Lopez at the weekend. And what are my thoughts on that? And a potential, it's been talked up, obviously, in the post-fight press conference. And even before the fight took place, of a potential Keith Thurman v Manny Pacquiao. Now, this was a chance for Keith Thurman to shake off some ring rust after a 2-year hiatus from boxing. To be honest, I didn't really expect this fight to be as competitive as it was. I thought Keith Thurman would take about 3 rounds longer due to ring rust to stop Lopez than Marcus Maidana, Andre Berto and Canelo Alvarez. Let's just put a few things into perspective. Lopez is considered a high contender, not champion worthy. You won't find him in the top 10 in the welterweight division. There was talks that Keith Thurman didn't take Jesse Vargas for some reason for his comeback fight. After watching the fight last night, and it's unbelievable saying this, I know why he didn't take Jesse Vargas. On that form, Jesse Vargas may have beaten Keith Thurman. Lopez, again, every time he stepped up via Victor Ortiz, has hit the canvas and failed to return. Or his fights have been waved off, as in the case of Andre Berto. And let's make no mistake, I thought that was a premature stoppage against Andre Berto. But nonetheless, Lopez was stopped by a Berto way past his prime. Here's Keith Thurman getting a majority decision against Lopez. I expect Keith Thurman did make a sharp start, but generally with ring rust, you tend to make a slow start and get better as the rounds go on. It was the opposite here. In fact, if you look at round 7, Lopez begins to hurt Keith Thurman, begins to pressure him, and manages to land concussive shots. Right? Keith Thurman's jab was good early. Keith Thurman's feet was good early. Keith Thurman, with that left hook, dropped Lopez. When Lopez returned to his feet, though, I expected, as the bell went to the end of the 4th round, for Keith Thurman to step on the gas and finish it in round 5. But he didn't even look close. In fact, Lopez, and it makes me wonder, has the right hand of Keith Thurman got injured in this fight? Lopez was beginning to completely disrespect Keith Thurman's power. That was really surprising to me. And as I said, he was teeing off and really hurting Keith Thurman to head and body throughout the fight, to be honest with you. Now, what can ring rust do? Yes, ring rust can do an awful lot of, temporary damage to a boxer until they begin, to get more in the groove as subsequent fights come into play. But the talent gap between these two guys was supposed to be huge, and talent is important in boxing. I've seen fighters that are not specifically fit absolutely wallop a journeyman who is in great shape. Didn't happen with this fight, though. Keith Thurman, you would think this was Pacquiao Marquez. You know what I mean? It was getting really competitive. I didn't agree with the judge that gave it a draw. I thought Keith Thurman won, but I did agree with the Fox commentary team, who only had the fight by, I think, 2 or 3 rounds to Keith Thurman. That was kind of my scorecard. Keith Thurman did not win that fight by 9 rounds or anything like that. Totally not buying that one, which I think the other 2 judges had it. Now, people say, to be honest with you, Manny Pacquiao at age 30, Lopez, if he fought Manny Pacquiao at age 30, even with ring rust, I think that Lopez's family would never recognize him again. There is no way that Keith Thurman, this version of Keith Thurman at age 30, is on the same level as Pacquiao was at 30. To be absolutely honest with you, Pacquiao looked 30 against Broner, and Thurman looked 40 against Lopez. Right? I'm not sure right now. I was thinking kind of that Keith Thurman, if the two was to square off in the ring right now, was, at the prime of his powers potentially and would beat Manny Pacquiao. I'm not sure anymore, to be honest, after seeing that. I think 40-year-old Manny Pacquiao would have done a better job on Lopez last night. Now, I know people are going to say, well, Lopez is a pressure fighter, styles make fights, Pacquiao doesn't fight that way, blah-de-blah-de-blah. But Lopez is very one-dimensional. He does the same things over and over and over again. And he's not particularly quick. He really doesn't have, to me, world-class punch variety. He tends to swing. And his footwork, his ability to change angles and things like that, is not close to even this Manny Pacquiao. And although Manny Pacquiao is not the type of pressure fighter that is constantly on your chest, just the fact that he is constantly moving, and there was no head movement from Lopez, but there is from Manny Pacquiao, just the fact he's there, close to you, moving, darting in and out, does burn an opponent's energy. I heard Hatman say you can't compare Pacquiao with Lopez, they're completely different styles. I would accept that if you were comparing Manny Pacquiao with Ricky Hatton. Ricky Hatton, a world-class pressure fighter in his prime. Miguel Cotto, a world-class pressure fighter in his prime. This is Lopez. He's not world-class. He's a very good fighter, real stubborn, tough, and all that stuff. But that's what he is. But there's no, what Floyd Mayweather used to say, there's no special effects on the guy. So, certain pressure fighters, yes, right? But Canelo Alvarez used to always stop a pressure fighter. He'd knock him out. Didn't with Gennady Golovkin? Arguably, he lost the first fight. And the second fight, well, that's up to your conclusions. But what I'm saying is, it's the level of pressure fighter that counts, not that it's a pressure fighter. Keith Thurman fought a low-level pressure fighter. And although Manny Pacquiao does not apply pressure the same, he's light years ahead of Lopez, much quicker, better defensively, better footwork, probably more one-punch power because Lopez is not known as a banger. Right? No, Pacquiao hasn't had a massive amount of knockdowns recently, but he's had a lot of knockdowns. And we're on the subject of knockdowns. Keith Thurman has not had a knockout in a long time. Think about that one. It's been a long, long time. He does have an issue with that body to me. I don't care what anyone tells me. He's never been stopped to the body, but he is very conscious of it. And of course, Pacquiao did give some withering bodywork to Adrian Broner in his last fight. Adrian Broner I know he's a different fighter to Lopez. He doesn't commit to the attack the same. Adrian Broner is a far better fighter all round than Lopez. And you know something? Them shots that were landing from Lopez, can you imagine if Lucas Matisse was landing them on Keith Thurman? Is Lopez a better fighter than Keith Thurman? Well, I'm not saying he's a better fighter than Keith Thurman, but is Lopez a better fighter than Lucas Matisse? Got to think about these things. These are the guys that Pacquiao's been beating lately and beating soundly. So, I can understand why Freddie Roach wants this fight next. And Keith Thurman, if I was him, the only thing for me that beats Manny Pacquiao v Keith Thurman, because we've got to see it as a fight-by-fight basis with Manny Pacquiao now, that is age. If Pacquiao was anything like he used to be, he'd beat Keith Thurman. The Pacquiao of age 30 v Keith Thurman age 30, Pacquiao would run through him like a bag of salts. I'm sorry, he would, right? It would be a destruction. And I know the pattern of the fight. Keith Thurman will be on the back foot. if a Pacquiao-Thurman fight happens. Keith Thurman was on the back foot against Lopez. And it's not the only time recently Keith Thurman's been on his back foot. Watch the Porter fight. Tough fight, right? Could have gone either way for me. And that was Thurman without ring rust. Danny Garcia, a clear win, but he was constantly having to move to attempt to outbox Danny Garcia in that fight. And Danny Garcia's, you talk about styles make fights. Danny Garcia's feet are like cement compared with Manny Pacquiao. So, comparing a C-level pressure fighter with a sort of Manny Pacquiao now, you can't do it. You can't do it. Keith Thurman, age may be on his side if he can shake more ring rust off against Manny Pacquiao. But that performance last night, Manny Pacquiao would have had an easy win over Keith Thurman. And not only Manny Pacquiao, that guy could not even touch Errol Spence fighting like that. Terence Crawford would have a field day. Worse. With Manny Pacquiao, because he's an aging fighter, we're kind of, we don't know either way. But with those guys, I think even Sean Porter would have massacred Keith Thurman last night. So, Thurman is choosing Pacquiao because he's thinking he's the softer touch. He's thinking of taking that fight because he sees Manny Pacquiao as the high money, but a bit of lower risk. This fight could be a lot more competitive than Keith Thurman and his fans think. Right? He'll be on that back foot. He's getting a habit now, as I said, of being defensively on that back foot. Yes, he throws leather, but then he seems to pedal off. And you're not telling me, if he'll do that against Lopez, you're not telling me he's going to stand there in the fire with Manny. That's not going to happen. I don't see it happening. Again, I'm not saying Keith Thurman can't win, but it will be a symptom of age that defeats Pacquiao, because if Pacquiao is even the Pacquiao of a few years ago, when he fought Jesse Vargas and all of that stuff, he could beat Keith Thurman. We could have a scenario where PBC and them very shady judges, decide to give Keith the nod in a close fight. But I see this being a competitive fight. At the moment, I'm stuck between a frog and a hot plate. Tyson Fury, right, come back and didn't look his best against two warm-up opponents and then looked good against Deontay Wilder. That could be the case with Keith Thurman in his next few fights. But Deontay Wilder is much more limited than Manny Pacquiao. You know what you get. You can kind of read what's going to happen with Deontay Wilder, and Tyson Fury for much of that fight could do that. It'll be interesting to see, because Pacquiao is a multi-dimensional fighter, what Keith Thurman still has to deal with that and how he deals with it. Pacquiao has fought fighters as good and better than Keith Thurman. Nothing is new to Pacquiao at this stage. But I think this could be new to Thurman. Particularly a Thurman who has had this longer layoff. At least Tyson Fury took 2 fights before taking on Deontay Wilder. Thurman is after Pacquiao next, apparently, and Freddie Roach is keen to get that next. Trust me, when you see Freddie Roach so infused about a fight, it's generally because he sees some cracks in the wall there, shall we say. He sees something that maybe he can get at. Primarily, I see Pacquiao moving that head, coming forward and hunting for the body. He's starting to do it a bit more in his career. They weren't just shooting them shots to the body left and right in training camp just for Adrian Broner. I think they're thinking subsequent fights when they're training for that. Keith Thurman, without them legs at the moment, if them legs are hit, and you see Lopez didn't have, he had to wait for Keith Thurman to slow down, because to give credit to Keith Thurman, he does have good foot speed. And he has good hand speed. And for a period of time, the power was there, but it sort of dimmed down as the fight went on. But Lopez, his feet are so flat-footed, he had to wait for Keith Thurman to slow down in the fight before he could let off some, shots and steam on Keith Thurman. Pacquiao can close the distance a lot quicker because his footwork is that much faster and foot speed than Lopez. So he'll be able to cover the distance quicker potentially against Keith Thurman and get some shots to the body, possibly slow Keith down, and then you've got a flat-footed Keith Thurman in front of Manny Pacquiao, and then it's down to the duel, isn't it? Hand speed v hand speed, which both have. But what I'm saying is, Keith Thurman is more avoidance than warrior at the moment. So just a few pointers to think about. I expected Keith to look rusty early, but I expected him to get this guy out of there. Lopez is not in the prime of his career. I don't care what anybody tells me. Robert Garcia is his trainer, blah, 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 blah. You're never at the peak of your career when you have been knocked out so badly over 3 times by world-class opponents. Impossible. And yet Keith Thurman couldn't get him out of there. I wonder, has something happened to his right hand? Because he constantly, to me, was looking for his left hook all the time and seemed reluctant to throw that right hand, right? But against better opposition, and he's thinking between Porter, Crawford, and Spence, and Pacquiao. He's thinking in his mind that Manny is the easiest of the 4. But make no mistake about it, on that evidence last night, Keith Thurman would have all his work cut out against Pacquiao. If Manny is still remotely Manny, even if a Manny at 40 is still in good shape by that time, Keith Thurman needs to pull some form together. He could do with another warm-up fight, if you ask me. But that's just some initial thoughts on it. Keith Thurman got the victory. It was clear enough, but it was not convincing. Even with that ring rust, I expected better than this. And people saying against styles make fights, come on, Lopez is sea level. Pacquiao is still a couple of levels above. So he'll need respect. This is Champions of Champions Boxing Talk. I'm out, brother.